Hello and welcome back to the West Ham Breakdown with me, Jack Elderton, and my mate Darcy Cox, replacing Cal this week, who, of the three of us with varying degrees of colds, has been the worst affected. We all watched that Leeds game and all felt thoroughly ill afterwards. And if you would like to join us in feeling quite sickly, you can join us over on patreon.com/analyticsunited. You can get a 7-day free trial. And there's loads of stuff on there. We've done a big recording day today. We've built up to the Newcastle match. PMP is really strong. It's pretty much pack show that we do. So if you want to go and have a look at all the data on the opposition, what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, how that affects the plan, what do we need to do in order to react to that, how can we find a way to be competitive in games, we do that whole process every single week over on Patreon, plus extra time the second half of this podcast, plus a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you have questions about how the team is playing that you want answered, you can head over to the Q&A over there and ask, and I shall answer those. But today on the pod, we have the story of another stinker, some tactical chats about the relevance of tactics when the team's level in the 1v1s is not very good at all. And then a look ahead to what the next steps are, what the challenges are, and what the context is more broadly, what other examples of teams in our position at this stage of the Premier League season are, and how can we draw on those examples. And then what can we draw from within? What positives can we see in a sea of negatives that can give us a route forwards to some kind of success? That's the plan for the pod. I don't know how it's actually going to go because much like a West Ham tactical plan at the moment, getting through these pods and retaining energy is a challenge, Darcy. How did you enjoy the match when you watched it? Because I found it bloody difficult.
Yeah. And it's, Joe, it's, I know this is not relevant at all, but having like with a last game of the previous game week on a Monday and then we have to with the first game on a Friday. Usually that, that's great. It's a weekday. It's the evening. I get to watch West Ham. But this week or last week, I guess, it was extremely exhausting, to be honest, to just have the front end and the back end of the week just be like two properly stinky performances.
Yeah, it was pretty shocking, right? I think there are lots of things that we'll pick out in there. We'll come to the second half, which was better. There were some things that we can take away from the second half, but you just can't get away with starting a game like that. We did coverage, of course, we do every game, but we did coverage of the first 7 games that really focused on the central themes of box defending, organisation, compactness, goalkeeper performances. That was a big theme of the first 4 games of the season where Mads Hermansen had such a difficult start to life at West Ham. The last 2 games have been very much those themes again. But with this complete inability to physically compete across the entire pitch added on top, which is not to say that physical level was a really strong element of what we were doing beforehand. But it wasn't quite such an unbelievably weak area as it is now. In the context of the league, it absolutely was. I still think we were one of the weakest teams, if not the weakest team physically in the league. But physically in the last 2, we haven't looked like a Premier League team at all.
Yeah, not at all. And Joe, I remember it might have been the first game week. Whenever did Leeds play Everton in the first game week?
It was early. I remember us talking about that. Yep.
Yeah. We spoke after the first game week, and I think they played a midfield 3 of Tanaka, Ampadu, and Anton Stack. And even in like some processes for transfer stuff we've done before, we looked at someone like Anton Stack and we're actually like, I don't know if he's mobile enough to kind of raise the level of our midfield. And then we looked at Leeds and we were like, actually, all 3 of those guys probably just walk into our midfield and are one of the best players. I think this was pre-Magassa signing as well. Maybe pre-Fernandes signing too. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah. It was start of the summer we were talking about these guys as players that, Anton Stack was on our lists. Tanaka was on our lists. Ethan Ampadu would have been on our lists. And then you come to the first game of the season, and I think we still hadn't really finalised a lot of the business that we wanted to do. And you're absolutely right. We were looking at that midfield and thinking, ooh, that's a level above where we are right now.
Yeah, we look way off that, and now I guess we kind of have very solid proof of that we are way off it. Those guys can outrun our midfield. They can, and not just outrun our midfield. Like in the duels, like I'm watching Souček and I'm seeing him be shoved off the ball by Tanaka, which isn't what you associate with someone who's as like physically big as Souček, right? Yeah, and there was a lot of moments in the game, I think, where it really sort of like I guess the team really brought it home for me in terms of like, wow, just we're not at the level, at least with that starting midfield. Obviously, as we go through the pod, I think we'll talk about some of the other options we have, and in the second half we obviously improved. But yeah, the starting 11 that we started with, particularly midfield, is just so far off physically that I think, I don't want to say it was doomed from the start, but it's so hard to compete. I think when the other team can not even literally run circles around you at times.
Yeah, which takes us really straight to the big question at the top of the podcast, which is, the Q&A is going to be full of that this week. What? I'm sorry, pardon? What's going on with the team that we started? I mean, start with midfield, but there's also the question at fullback. There's a question of, playing a 4-4-2/5. Diouf's going back and defending kind of like a left wing back at times, but then also he sort of feels a bit more like a left midfielder in other moments. I would say it was more of a 4-4-2, which was forced to be a 5 in moments because Leeds, early in the game when Goodmanson's on the pitch, we know they like to push the left back very high. Bogle also goes high in the game, so we have to react to that, and that's why it feels like a 5 in moments. But yeah, there are so many questions to be asked about the way in which we started the game, the selection over the last two matches. But I think the place to start really is in midfield. Like, what could possibly motivate a decision to start Souček and Irving to begin with together in deeper in midfield against Brentford? But what on earth could motivate a decision to stick with those two after what we saw in that game for this one against Leeds?
When I saw it, I thought the only thing that might be happening is he's looked at the Brentford game. Nuno's looked at the Brentford game, right, and been like, okay, we're not pressing. We're not going to go and try and win the ball high up. We're actually going to constrict the space that those two have to cover. And really, what the aim is going to be is be so compact that when the ball goes into the block, actually the long legs of someone like Irving and Souček, and the physical strength that they have over the Leeds midfield, especially without Anton Stack, it's going to sort of sway the duels in their favour. So yes, we're not going to be that progressive. Yes, we can't cover ground very well. We can't try and win the ball up high. But fundamentally, we're not going to concede, and we've got two big guys who are going to help us defend the box quite well. Obviously, literally from kickoff, it was obvious that wasn't the game plan, and we were going to go and try and win the ball high, which to me leaves me with way more questions than any sort of answers or understanding of why it happened. So obvious, I think, even like pre this season, that at least Souček isn't going to function well if you put him in a role where, one, he's got dual responsibilities in the press, but two, he's got to cover a lot of ground to go and get out to the man that's his, or one of the men that's his. So yeah, I think the question is very valid, because I don't necessarily understand what the motivation behind it was at all either.
Yeah, it's very difficult to understand. I mean, when you say we went out to try and win the ball high, it's hard to defend that position after what we see at the start of the game with the level of press intensity that we actually manage. But what you're referring to is the roles that the midfielders are given, and the fact that we see Souček stepping up out of the midfield, committing high onto Leeds midfielders that are dropping out. Leeds, if they're comfortable baking in any level of rotation anywhere in their team, it's with those midfielders widening and being quite deep. So they start with Rodon and Biol, and then you see Tanaka sometimes feeling a little bit like a third centre back. But really, what's going on, I think, more generally is it's more of like a 2-3, where Tanaka and Longstaff are really quite wide. Of Ampadu as a single pivot, and that can really stretch the opposition. If the opposition is sitting in a 4-4-2, which we were, it asks a question of kind of how do you cope with the width that we get with the midfield on the second line. And we see decisions made to commit Souček out of the middle of the pitch for us and higher, to try and find a way to get closer to them in build up, which ultimately only sort of translates to situations where Souček is unable to handle the dual responsibilities that he's given, is unable to handle the ground coverage that is required as a result of that, and is easily beaten on numerous occasions, which directly then leads to Andy Irving being isolated in midfield and having to defend against players that are carrying, which is a situation that we know, I mean, it might be a new thing in terms of seeing him start back-to-back games in the Premier League for us in midfield, but, you know, I think even in cameos, we've seen enough of Andy Irving to know that expose him to central carriers and things are probably going to go very badly wrong in that area. Souček struggling with dual responsibilities in the press is one thing. I think when we talk about Irving, we have to say that out of possession, I just don't think it's going to work. I mean, we recorded the Q&A earlier. We're doing everything quite early this week, and partly the benefit of having a Friday fixture, it's easier to get things ticked off early in the week. But, you know, I said 3-year-olds or however old you are, when you're told the hare and the tortoise story, rejoiced because, you know, when you felt conned at that age that you were told that, no, it's not the hare, it's the tortoise. Well, this seems conclusive proof to the opposite. The hare definitely wins, and the hare wins every time because, unfortunately, he's not blessed with great physical speed compared to other Premier League players, and that makes life difficult. And the pace of the game and the anticipation required, the forethought required, the ability to accelerate quickly, to be able to react to the moments that you see developing is crucial in these areas, especially when you're left isolated. And, you know, and tell me if I'm being unfair, but I think it was pretty clear that in all areas defensively, it kind of fell apart, much like it did against Brentford, which, you know, begs a question immediately for me, which is, you know, if James Ward-Prowse was dropped for these ills, what's going to happen to Andy Irving? Because this feels kind of the same but worse.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question, to be honest. And yeah, I've seen some debate about his performance as well, because there is some nice stuff on the ball.
Absolutely, much like there is nice stuff on the ball when Ward-Prowse plays. There's some simple, good stuff on the ball with both. Yeah, but
to be honest, it's actually, the more I think about it, it's a very apt comparison to Ward-Prowse, right? Because you are just getting sort of this. You know, like Irving on the ball, he can find forward passes. Otherwise, he's just sort of circulating. He's good on the half turn, playing left to right. But you know, you talk about speed. It's also things like agility, change of direction are just not there at all. There's that one moment which I'm sure we'll refer to a couple of times where is Brenden Aaronson takes out our whole midfield with one carry, and that starts with Irving being the first domino, really, isn't it? There's sort of no care there's no forethought about what's behind him. You know, I'm just charging at this guy and I'm not thinking about the situation I'm putting myself in. So it's not just that he's physically not at the level defensively, you know, in terms of change of direction and speed. I think it's also kind of like the mental awareness, which as we know is the big criticism of James Ward-Prowse as well. He doesn't know what's going on behind him, and it puts us in poor situations. So it's a rock and a hard place.
For sure it is, and if rock and a hard place is what we're facing in midfield, I don't know what we're doing in the fullback positions, because we seem to just be making life harder for ourselves unnecessarily at the moment. Lots of question marks, I think, over the continued decision to play fullbacks on the wrong side. You know, it's a question that was asked over on Patreon, and you know, I was thinking maybe there's some hangover from Nottingham Forest, where he had a cast of maybe some more flexible fullbacks. You know, Nico Williams is a player that can do really well on both sides. And you know, there is upside to be gained from players that can drive inside the pitch from fullback positions, and we see that in one moment where Ollie Scarles drives forward really brilliantly through the centre of the pitch, and then unfortunately gets a serious looking injury off the back of what should have been a foul. I'm pretty certain against Joe Rodon. Yeah, but the inverse of that, or the other side of that, is that, you know, Ollie Scarles is a defender that we know is pretty poor in the air, has had those struggles in youth football, never mind coming and stepping up into senior football. and then you put him on the wrong side where everything's different. The body position is a bit different. The angles are a bit different. Everything feels a bit different. And he faces across, and immediately we see the consequences of that. I think it's quite hard to formulate an argument that defends a decision to take risks in so many areas at the same time in such crucial games, and risks that involve players like Scarles, where you're putting young players in new situations in such critical moments for the team in the context of the team's season. Is there anything you can say that sort of defends some of those decisions, or that supports any of those decisions, or is it just as simple as, with things like the fullbacks on the wrong sides, with Souček and Irving in midfield together, with Juve and Somerville on the flanks, but like Somerville kind of on the wrong side? Like, is it as simple as let's stop messing around with the experimentation and let's get the best players on the pitch in the best positions to get the best level of physical competition in the group?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the latter. And I'm almost a little bit surprised about like how much experimentation we've seen from Nuno. Just because when I really think of Nuno previously, I see him very much as let's get our players who are the best in Area A or Area B doing the things that they know, and being as good as they can be, raising their floor essentially. And to me, this is very the opposite of that. It's like, I'm still exploring my squad. I've obviously, he's worked with a group of our squad across the international break, and he's obviously seen something, particularly in Scarles' case, and the midfield pairing as well, where he thinks that's somehow going to platform us to work. I still don't 100% get it. I don't think anyone necessarily does get what the upside was intended to be, particularly with because if you want to play fullbacks on the wrong side, right, you've got, well, I guess it wouldn't be playing both guys on the wrong side, but you have Aaron Wan-Bissaka and Kyle Walker-Peters, who are both quite two-footed, to be honest. So you could just play them both either side and sort of get the same effect, and you wouldn't be putting a young player who's got a very obvious exploitable weakness in the air in a position where Premier League teams can go and exploit that, because they will. So yeah, look, I mean, long story short, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't get why he did it, and I really hope that it stops at this point. I think, particularly second half, that's kind of, at least defensively, that's sort of the blueprint I think that we want to see. Play our fullbacks on the right side.
I had Jean-Claire Todibo on the plan, but he's going into extra time, and frankly, that's where he deserves to be. So we'll break there, and then we'll move on to some tactical discussion. So if we discussed a lot of tactical elements there that we weren't quite sure about, that we started with which we started the game, I suppose the counterbalancing question, which we immediately have to ask, given the state of team performance at the moment and individual performance within team performance, is any of that even really that relevant if you can't compete 1v1 physically? Of course, you want to pick the best team to do that, and that's a separate question. But in terms of whether it's a 4-4-2, a 5-3-2, or whatever, a 4-2-3-1, a 4-3-3, in terms of the structure of exactly where you're going to, make a commitment to jump, where you're not going to make a commitment to jump, where you're going to press, what your triggers are, how important is any of that if you can't win headers in the box, you can't win second balls in the box, you can't win 1v1 physical duels in midfield, you can't win duels at the top of the pitch either to help yourself get up the pitch? What does any of it matter?
Yeah, well, it doesn't fundamentally. It's really difficult to make it better. I think the physicality and the dueling of your players is exactly what platforms the tactics and make it work, right? So if you can choose to sit in a low or a mid block and soak up pressure, be very, very zonal, and if when the ball comes into the block, your players are going to miss the duel, you may as well have gone and pressed, right? You may as well have gone and tried to win the ball near the goal, because maybe you get lucky and you're able to go and you win the ball higher up and you're able to go create a good chance. So, I mean, obviously there's
emphasis on you get lucky, right? Because again, if you try and press without the physical level required, then you're going to be late to everything, and then you're going to be cut through very easily, and you'll face big chances that start very simply in deeper areas. And emphasis heavily on the being lucky there.
Yeah, and you end up essentially. I think the less you're able to win your 1v1s and be strong and physical in your duels, the more that you end up moving towards a direction of like playing the probabilities. But if you're going to play the probabilities, the one thing to be really good at is competing physically, right? So actually, something that's a 50-50 turns into a 60-40. So yeah, it's fundamentally it's very, very difficult to platform your players in any way tactically, or platform a team any way tactically if the physical level is not there. If players are not arriving at the right times, if when someone is 1v1 attacking or defending, chances are they're going to lose that. It's I don't want to say it's not completely relevant. I think that was a bit of an overstep at the start of this part, but it's such a big part of making all the ideas that go on the training pitch work. It does very much feel like, well, you know, like where do you go from here? Our legs are being cut out from us because we can't duel. You know, there's no real way to stay in games because we cannot duel.
Straight away, the next question then is what changes in the second half, because that is everything we see in Brentford. That is everything we see in the first half of this game. It's the first 60 minutes of this game against Leeds. Fernandes comes on, Magassa comes on eventually, Potts comes on, Walker-Peters comes on eventually. Obviously Wilson had come on in the first half earlier when Scarles got injured. What changes? What is it that helps us improve when those players come on?
Well, I mean, it's all of the things that we just talked about, all the things that we've said that we're missing. Really, from different players, we get all of those things from the guys that come on. I think with Fernandes, what you get is someone that's super buzzy, covers ground, is going to get in people's faces, and he did exactly that. And not just out of possession as well. You know, he very much used all the kind of the energy overcut or undercut that he had over players that have been on the pitch most of the game. He definitely used a lot of that in the second half to make sure he was in more places than they were. That's winning your duels. That's competing physically. It's not necessarily winning your 1v1s, but sometimes it is. And then with Magassa and Potts, it's in those 1v1 moments. Can you keep up with your player? Can you win your aerials? And I think both of those guys came on and did quite a good job of that. There's one point when Magassa tracks back and makes a slide tackle really well, that if you had Irving or Souček in that position, that player who was getting away on the right, I can't remember who it is, they get away. They end up through on our defence. Then there's a header as well for Potts that's on the halfway line when he ends up covering in the back line. That one, how he gets out there is really impressive, and two, how he directs the header afterwards. That extra little bit of care after winning the duel. Oh, actually, I want this ball to go to my teammate. That kind of stuff is the big difference in competing physically for me.
Yeah, and that's the key thing, right? And that's what's so frustrating, I think, about the last two lineups, is that these players come off the bench and elevate the team physically. Now, there are other issues, undoubtedly, right? Potts is a very young player. His 1v1 track is not great. I'm not talking about duels. I'm talking about, go back to the Lille game in pre-season, look at the job that Aaronson does on him, the fact that he's like, he can find it a little bit difficult when he's got to control the movement of one player and stick with them and not lose them. It should be a little bit easier for him under Nuno anyway, because some of the responsibilities are different. It's more zonal. You're less likely to be given a kind of like, you're playing at the base of a midfield three. The two guys next to you are going to go high in the attack, and there's going to be a 10, and you need to stay with the 10 wherever the 10 goes. It's not likely to be so much like that. And, you know, in many ways, there's no shame in the follow-up that happens in the Prem, right? Because he gets thoroughly well beaten in an individual battle with Moises Caicedo against Chelsea as well. But that's Caicedo, right? So there are issues there. There are issues with Walker-Peters. We know he's quite slight compared to the other options that we have in the fullback areas and some of the other fullbacks in the Premier League. I mean, look at a guy like Michael Coyote and the form that he's shown at Brentford so far. Fernandes, we know that at the moment he hasn't quite found a home positionally. He hasn't got that stability, and as a result, there isn't that repeatability in everything that he's doing at the moment. There's a bit of variance in what we get from him. We know that his dueling is not super, super, super strong. We know he's going to get to lots of loose balls. We know he's going to compete for a lot of second balls. We know that he's going to harry opposition players. But in a 1v1 where he has to physically stand up and win an aerial or win a shoulder-to-shoulder battle, he's one of the smaller midfielders. It's probably going to be more difficult for him. And Magassa, we know that there's a period of adaptation that's going to be there, and there's going to be moments where he's overwhelmed by things. And we've seen that. He had a horrendous performance earlier this season where he was completely overwhelmed by everything. So, there are issues with all of these players. But I think one thing that they all have in common at the moment is they're all helping us compete physically a lot better when they're on the pitch. The level of intensity from Walker-Peters is good. The level of intensity from Fernandes is good. The level of intensity from Magassa is better. And when he's getting into duels, it's much better than most of the other players in the squad. And the level of intensity and desire and willingness, coverage, and like you say, care as well with Potts is also really good. And ultimately, these are all things that can help us be more successful in games. So they come on, they help us, we're better. I think there's a clear blueprint there for what happens next. These players need to play. They're helping us be a more successful version of ourselves. The next thing for me is looking at broad strokes data, which we're going to do some more of in the back end of the pod. There's one thing that comes out completely clearly, right? We finished the game, we play well in the last 20 minutes of the game. I think we play really, really much better than we have done for the rest of the Brentford game and the rest of the Leeds game combined. You put every good moment together and stitch it into one string from the Brentford and Leeds games. It's not a patch on the last 20 minutes of the Leeds game. That's much better than anything we've done in the rest of those games. One thing is still clear, we don't create enough from that. There's some better periods of sustained momentum. There's some better periods of sustained pressure. There's some better periods of sustained possession. There's some better periods of sustained territory. Mateus Fernandes, I think, particularly was very, very, very good at helping us access more dangerous areas, at helping stretch the Leeds midfield, at combining. Lucas has a couple of good moments in this period as well. I think Potts makes a big impact. Walker-Peters stepping into midfield, big impact. There's some really good things about what we do towards the end of the game, and Bowen steps up with a big high impact moment, which we know we can get out of him, and it's actually a really, really nice run from Fernandes, but also a really nice run from Magassa as well, which he creates all the space for everyone here. He creates the space for Bowen to cut in and cross, but he also creates the space for Fernandes in the box because he makes a run that kind of confuses Beale for a second because he's not entirely sure where he's going. He's not entirely sure who's going to pick him up. And the narrowing that we might have seen otherwise closer to his centre-back partner doesn't really happen. He gets a bit stuck in the mud. There's a bit of space that opens up. The cross comes in and we score. This is good, but there's not much beyond that we create in that moment. And when you broaden that out and you look at, okay, when we're really being successful in a moment in the game, we're not creating very much. And you look at the rest of the season, we're joint bottom for non-penalty XG so far this season in the league. We're bottom for quality of shots, so MPXG per shot, we're bottom for that in the league so far this season. So if that's the case, if we're not going to create a huge amount, and we know we're not going to create a huge amount, it's not likely to just shift instantly. One of the things that could help it shift is if we're really good at soaking up pressure and counter-attacking. In order to do that, we need to be able to defend our box. We're not defending our box, so we're unlikely to see that. That's something we might be able to see happen a bit better if Mavropanos were fit and could play alongside Kilman. We might actually see kind of more of let's back off and settle into a block and defend and head the ball out and use Bowen and Somerville to break away and Paquetá to be kind of a fulcrum for counterattacks and maybe there's something there. But right now we can't do that because A, some of the players that we're selecting, which is a separate issue, and B, really because Mavropanos isn't here, and the options to replace him are two players who have a history of not being that good in the air, one of which we haven't seen in Claret & Blue really yet, and one of which who is performing horrendously at the moment in a West Ham shirt. So what does the focus need to be? What do our focuses as a team need to be when we know that the level that we can create, the amount that we can create, and the quality that we can create is going to be limited kind of regardless for the time being until we can shift something either with players returning or with new players coming in January? What are the immediate things that jump out to you?
I think the big needle mover somewhere where in periods like this previously, we could sort of lean on this as a way to get through games, score goals. Is I think we need some focus on set pieces. To be honest, I think that's probably the big way to get some upside. Like as I was saying, in periods where we were very unproductive under David Moyes, things that were able to get us through games was the fact that, we can whip a really good ball into the box using James Ward-Prowse from a corner, and then Craig Dawson is going to head it in the net, or Angelo Bonner is going to head it in the net. Different eras, but you get what I'm saying. And that, I feel like we're just completely missing that, right? We get set pieces. I just don't think we look particularly dangerous. I don't think either of the centre-backs that we're starting at the minute look like big threats from, they don't look aggressive in the way that you see like Gabriel for Arsenal. Like, he's on the edge of the box, and I feel like it's almost like a line out in rugby. He like flies in there, jumps in with a lot of power and force, and it's I think there's potential there though, because you actually see, like, if you look at Kilman's quality per shot, his non-penalty XG per shot, it's actually really high, because he is able to connect with corners. And I think he's been consistently able to do that across his West Ham career. There's just maybe a lack of killer instincts there. I would say this season we're probably lacking the right sort of delivery as well. But I mean, that's always going to happen when you don't have James Ward-Prowse in the team when you once did. But if we
financial
could get
deliveries.
Yeah.
It's so bad. Like, everything else he did was great, but God, I don't want to see him take set pieces.
Yeah.
It was so bad.
That free kick that we win, and he just sort of like kicks it off the pitch for a Leeds goal kick was not great at all. So basically, picking a set piece taker and being that can provide consistent quality. I think would be a really useful addition, because we do have players that can be real threats from set pieces. I mean, we have Tomáš Souček. I know we're both sort of sitting here being like, that his place in the team there's question marks around it, but in the last 20 minutes, I don't think there's any question marks around whether Tomáš Souček can be a really effective tool. And if you're able to generate some set pieces in that time, even if you're not creating good chances in open play, that is a really good chance if the delivery is right, because Tomáš Souček is very good in the box. And I think someone like Max Kilman can be as well. So
Callum Wilson, if anything drops, can stick it in as well. So you've got a player in there who can be really good. Like Mikel Antonio scored hoovered up a bunch of goals like that, just standing in front of the keeper, and it drops and he just smashes it in.
Yeah, reacts first.
Wilson can be good for that. His anticipation in those moments will be really good if we can get first contact.
Yeah, but set pieces, I think, is probably the easiest and maybe like the highest return way to add some goals to this team right now, because like our hands are all a little bit tied in terms of creating from open play. I mean, you could maybe try and focus on the relationships surrounding Jared Bowen as well, because I do think he was good in this game. And probably came up with the goods more than anyone did across the 90, created a couple of good chances. But we maybe don't have, in the way that a lot of good moments for West Ham have been built around like successful relationships between players, like it is for any team, to be honest. But you think of like Paquetá and Emerson connected really well, and we're able to be creative from that. I would say we don't have that for Bowen right now, and that doesn't really make sense when Bowen's your best player. He's very good, but he can't do it all on his own. And I wonder if maybe Mateus Fernandes and Jared Bowen could be a little bit more of essentially our right hand side relationship that's able to create a more fruitful dynamic, let's say. But I think that's more longer term, whereas set pieces you can get instant return on if you focus on them properly.
That and counter pressing, I think, for me, is a big thing. If we can be better to react on our reaction to when we lose the ball, we're going to have lots of attacks that break down. Basically, is what I'm saying. We're going to have a lot of attacks that break down. And if we can react better when we immediately turn the ball over, when teams take risks to try and counter themselves, we'll potentially find some easy routes to generate some better chances. And in a player like Fernandes, he will give us a little bit of a better level to do that. Like, he immediately improves the counter pressing when he comes on against Leeds. So with him, with Lucas, if he's had some caffeine, and if we can, get a little bit of a better level out of the wingers, which I've not really been impressed with their level in terms of from a counter-pressing point of view this season. Then there's something there as well that we can work on, improve on, and utilize as a way of generating something, as a way of generating better momentum, even if it's not more chances in games, better control. So those are the two really big things that I think are short-term, easy focuses that we can think about over the next week. You know, can we find a way to be a little bit more effective than we haven't really got a plan on a set piece and we're just going to lump it in the box and hope for the best? Like, I think we should try and find a way of being better than that, because that's what it looks like at the moment. And then can we also really focus on those moments in turnover and being effective and working hard and not switching off in those moments, because there's been a little bit of kind of like, oh, we've lost the ball and I've switched off a little bit because I'm frustrated that we've lost the ball. It's just like that needs to go, because if the physical level is already a bit of a struggle, then we can't really afford for that. We'll lose too much control of games. Let's take a break there, and then we'll come on to the road ahead and the positives in the data that make us feel slightly better than we do right now. Well, like I said at the top of the show, there's a lot more stuff coming on Patreon this week. We've got Q&A, PMP, Preview Pod, FPL show. The quizzes have been really great fun recently. I know I've said that on the pod a few times, but it's really worth signing up if you want to. If you enjoy GeoGuessr, we've been doing some really fun GeoGuessr play-alongs with the Patreon community, which has been lovely. Had some really fun evenings duking it out with everyone to see if I can recognise football stadiums in Northern Ireland faster than anyone else can. So yeah, patreon.com/Analytics United if you want to get involved. We'd love to see you there. Road ahead then. I'm going to keep this brief because it's very gloomy, and then we'll move along to those positives that we can pick out here and there in the data. The headline is this, and I think it's really important to say this. Jared Bowen came out after the game and he said everyone needs to understand the situation we're in and come out and fight. And I think the first bit of that is really important. Everyone must understand the situation that we're in. And if we don't understand the situation we're in, we're going to find it very difficult to combat the situation that we're in. We have to accept where we are and work from where we are. And if we don't want to accept where we are, that's a good thing. We have to use that energy in the right way. And that has to come from full and frank conversations about actually where exactly we are. And that is on 4 points. And over the last 20 years, only a third of teams that have had 4 points or fewer at this stage have stayed in the division. So it's tough from here on. Like, we have to be so much better in these games. We cannot afford to drop points in these games. In this sort of mini league, anyone beneath 14th is a game that we can't lose. And every game against any team below 14th from here to the end of the season is a cup final. And we have to turn up for it like it is a cup final. Can't turn up for it half-baked. You have to be ready to fight for every ball in the way that you would if you were, you know, in the last 3 games of the season, needing to win each of them to stay in the division. We have to play like that now against everyone around us from here to the end of the season. And if we do that and we do that well, we might find that by game week 20, 25, 30, that we're in a different situation and we've pulled away from it. And that's great, you know, and then, you know, that denial of acceptance of where exactly we are, you know, wouldn't have been so terribly misplaced because we'd be more in line with where these players think they should be in the league. But if we don't accept that, and if we don't do that, and we don't put that effort in, and we don't fight in that way for every ball, in the way that Bowen described, which is what I want my captain doing after a game like this, then it's a non-starter. The headline stat is bad. 1/3 of teams. The recent examples are a little bit better. Wolves did it last season. Bournemouth did it in 23-24. Forest did it in 22-23. Newcastle did it the season before that. So in each of the last 4 seasons, there's an example of a team who's found themselves in a situation like this and got out of it. There are a couple of teams around us though, right? It's like this every year, you know? So it's not just us. Forest will feel similar. And Wolves will feel similar. And what we have to ensure, and certainly when it comes to Wolves, we have to be that team. We can't let it be Wolves. We have to be better than Wolves every single week. and that has to be target number one. We need to be better than Burnley every single week. Burnley have picked up some really good points early in the season, but the data is a little bit more concerning for them. The broad data is not so good. The underlying data is not so good. I think there's going to be some regression there. So we have to be better than them every single week. And then we have to look at the teams around that battle right now. Fulham haven't started well. Forest haven't started well. These are the kind of teams that we need to, target. And we can't let them pull away. We just cannot afford to let them pull away. We have to stay within touching distance of these teams or pull away from those teams ourselves. So that's the focus. Only 2 teams have done it together from less than 4 points, fewer than 4 points at this stage in the same season on one occasion over the last 20 years. It just doesn't happen. So it's going to be one of us when it comes to us and Wolves that has a chance of surviving. And we have to have that kind of focus. Like I say, from this point forward, if that's gloomy, I thought we should bookend the podcast with some positives. And you spent a lot of time with the data this week, as you do every week, building towards pre-match pack and preview and looking at the opposition. And of course, within there are a lot of league comparisons and player data comparisons that draw out what our players are doing well as well, if they are doing anything well. So in the work that you've been doing, what are the big things that have stood out to you as kind of like guiding lights that we can look at to drag us forward out of the situation that we're in, drag us through the situation that we're in, and also things that can kind of be foundational elements for us in terms of understanding ourselves as a team and understanding what we need to do well and what we need to focus in on, what we need to hone in on, and do more of over the course of the rest of the season.
Yeah, well, in the data, it does seem like our focus over the last season or two of, let's be a bit better let's be a lot better with the ball as a team. Let's be a more possession focused ball with the team has actually paid some dividends. That we're able to control a good amount of possession. Our average across the season is 47.2. And in previous seasons it's been a lot lower than that, like towards 40. And also that so if you look at a team like Fulham this season, for example, who haven't started the season very well, actually are quite close to us too, and maybe a little bit worried, and in that sort of group that you were talking about. I think the big issue with someone like them is that they're often getting stuck in their defensive third, so they're trying to play out a bit more possessionally, and they're getting stuck in their defensive third. And one of the comparisons we use is touch proportions by third. So as a percentage of all your touches, how many of your touches are coming in defensive third, attacking third, and midfield third. Fulham are getting stuck in their defensive third. We don't have that issue. So 38% of their possession, or just over 38% of their possession, comes in the defensive third. For us, it's just below 34, I think. So we're able to move into midfield and we're able to have the ball more. So things have definitely improved there, and that's something we can definitely use moving forward. Looking at individual players, we have some good progressors in the team, like Lucas Paquetá. I know he loses the ball a lot, but actually, if you look across the league, he is one of the better progressors in terms of frequency. He doesn't necessarily cover distance, but he finds line breakers. He's able to move you forward, which obviously will contribute to the team level data that we're just talking about. And Kyle Walker-Peters as well. We saw him move into midfield in this game and actually be really, really effective at times, and kind of make use of himself being a spare man because he's moving in there rather than just existing there. And he's a good two-way progressor. He's able to carry forward at a decent level. He's able to pass forward at a decent level. So we have players that can move us forward, and as a team, we're not getting stuck at the base of the pitch and then just punting the ball forward always. I know it might seem like that throughout games, but actually, based on the data, we are able to move forwards.
We are doing that a lot. It's worth saying. So people who are listening going, but I see that all the time. That you are right. You see that all the time. You've seen it a lot more in the last two games because of the midfield that we selected.
Yes.
And the actual broader data suggests that, there's a lot of noise that will come out of the last two games that makes us feel like, we just can't do anything at all. But across the rest of the season, there's a bit more evidence to suggest that there are some underlying stuff that is okay, that's a bit better in terms of moving out of defence and into midfield.
Yeah, 100%. going forward as an attack, we're like, you know, I think everyone knows we're not massively creative. We've just had a whole 20-minute discussion about it, to be honest. So we're not particularly creative, but there are some routes where, relative to ourselves, we're less bad, let's say, and that is when you look at producing shots from set pieces and producing shots as a result of dribbles and take-ons. That really dovetails well if you're a bit more of a counter-attacking team, and we definitely need to kind of lean into those being our strengths, and like we have done historically, to be honest, those have often been our focuses, being good on transition, taking on players, and then if we win corners from that, all the better, right? Because we've got big centre backs, we know we can connect with the ball. It's just about getting those moments right at this point.
So is that the phone ringing?
Is it?
Sounds like James Ward-Prowse is calling from outside. He's like, this is just a faint sound on the window. Can I come back into training, please, sir? I'll take the corners.
Yeah, he is. You know, he is ready for his apology. So serve it up whenever you're ready, maybe publicly, because we need him back. And Joe, on attacking positivity, Ward-Prowse is definitely not this type of player, but Bowen and Fernandes, I think, are. Maybe it's unfair to say this about Fernandes, but Bowen is you know, he's a maverick type. He can out of nowhere make something happen when the odds look like they're against him. But both players, Fernandes and Bowen, are capable of creating quality and providing a little bit of magic, I guess, in attack, which is exactly what you need when you're a team that are going to focus on like more transitional take-on based sort of attacks, or you're looking to generate a lot of set pieces because that's what you're putting your stocks in. Having those maverick type players who, even if they've got two players tracking them, they're still able to go and do something productive with the ball is really, really important. And I think in Bowen and potentially in Fernandes as well, we definitely have that at times. Like, you know, we can't expect them to be doing this in every attack. A lot of them are going to be an attempt to do that kind of thing, and then actually it doesn't work, and then we need to reset from there. But leaning into those guys, along with what we've just talked about in terms of like set pieces and take-ons, I think is really important. In terms of the
striker, saying as well, just briefly, with those guys that, you know, by league comparison compared to other players, they also rank relatively well in terms of the quality that they're able to create when they do create. So they don't necessarily pop up as like high volume creators. They're not creating loads of chances all of the time. But when Fernandes does create a chance, or when Bowen does create a chance, it's usually quite a good one. Yeah.
Very well said. Then up front, I mean, as we know, it's a little bit bleak with our striker situation, but Callum Wilson, as he has done all his career, to be honest, is able to get high value shots. So he moves well in the box, and then when he does shoot, he's selective, but when he does shoot, oftentimes the XG of that shot is quite high. So if we are able to create one or two high quality chances, like we've said since he came in, you give him a good chance, chances are he'll finish it. He's very efficient in that way. Having that is also a little bit of a superpower, I think.
Yeah, also he's very important to helping generate that big chance, right? So with some strikers, it can be very difficult to generate chances for them because their movement isn't so good. That is one of the stronger elements of Wilson's game. So, of course, he inhibits progression to some extent because when the team isn't operating well, we can't just whack it long to him and use him as a way to get up the pitch. That's a big problem. That is the big problem we get with Wilson in the team. That and his capacity to chase things around at his age after all the injuries that he's had. Those are the two big issues that we face with him. The question of whether when we arrive in the final third, he's going to be in the right place in the box to receive a chance if the quality is then provided isn't such a big question. He will be there. And if the quality is provided, he'll be able to score. So that's something that we can, you know, it's not something that we can build around. It's not something that we can like be really excited about. But of what we have, you know, there's been a lot of chat, for example, about, you know, the strikers are useless. Let's just play Callum Marshall. I'm not saying that Callum Marshall isn't good and isn't an exciting young player that can offer something for us and can chase things down and run channels and stuff. But you have to make a judgment call over a player that probably isn't going to win any aerials either, but will give you a better level out of possession and a more ability to run the channels, and someone who you can kind of hang your hat on. If Bowen, Diouf, Somerville, Paquetá, Fernandes arrive in the kind of position to make a cutback, play a through ball, or whip across into the box, he will be in the right spot, will have lost the centre-back to be able to get a high-value shot off of. And that judgment call, I would say when we create so little, I think it's relatively easy to make, I would suggest.
Yeah. Having someone that, if you are able to create a good chance, you believe is going to finish it, I think is really important in our situation, because we're not going to create very many big chances.
And it's going to help you create the good chance. That's the key thing. Yeah. He's going to be part of generating the good chance with his movement.
Yep.
It's going to give a target for one of those players arriving in a good position to cross to play that through ball to make that cutback for.
Yeah, and last thing to pull out of the data is that Magassa and Fernandes, guys that we've signed to be full of energy, defensively active, it seems like it's going that sort of way. Obviously, they've both been in and out of the team, so the data is not perfect, but on a per 90 level, they both seem like they're essentially doing what we want them to do out of possession. They're covering ground, they're winning tackles, and really, I think all the data points towards if we don't want to see a repeat of what's happened in the last two games, those are the kind of guys that need to be playing.
They need to be playing, and they need stability, right? They need to develop relationships with each other and with the players around them. And if they're just dropping in for 20 minutes here and there, in Magassa's case, or playing left wing, right wing, 10, 6, 8, joining the centre-backs, running forward beyond the striker, it's going to be very difficult to develop relationships in that case as well for Fernandes. So a bit more stability in there. And a bit of a return to the very basic thing of like, why did we sign these guys and what are we not doing well? They seem to be the same thing. Why are we not playing them? You know, let's get them on the pitch. Fernandes is obviously playing, but in Magassa's case, why are we not playing him? And Fernandes actually, hasn't started, didn't start this game. So definitely players that need to be involved. There you go. That's it. It's kind of slim pickings, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of the things that we really need to focus around. And actually some interesting questions that come off the back of that, right? Because there are points about set pieces that lean heavily towards someone like a Ward-Prowse. There are points about take-ons that lean more towards someone like a Crescencio Somerville. We've made points about Potts, Magassa and Fernandes needing to play more regularly. The set pieces point and the point about being competitive physically in the box off those situations leans in favour of Tomáš Souček. So when you've got all of these competing things, figuring out and finding your way through that noise to, okay, what's the right balance is the next step that we need to take. And that's a conversation that we're going to have over on Extra Time. So join us for that. Patreon.com/analytics United. I always speed way too fast through that. We'd love to see you there. And thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.